David Peterson just put his name on the map as an all-star candidate this year, finishing off the first shutout of his career.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets where your first $5 bet wins. What an incredible game on Wednesday night for the New York Mets. David Peterson is the headliner, and we're going to spend the entire show on him because not only was this the best start of his career, this is the type of start where you start to change your perception of a player. Where now we're not just talking about David Peterson, quality middle of the rotation starter. We're talking David Peterson is potentially an all-star this year, and he might just be a homegrown ace all of a sudden because that's how good he has looked this season. That's how good he's looked since he came off the injured list last year. But we got a lot of time for all of that. I want to give the lineup a little bit of credit on the front end of this show before we just devolve to nothing but Peterson talk, because the Mets look great against Jake Irvin. Brandon Nimmo had an incredible game, walks in the first inning, scores on an RBI double by Pete Alonso. It was Alonso's 21st double of the season. That leads the National League. His 63rd RBI of the season. That leads Major League Baseball. So Pete stays hot. Third inning, Francisco Lindor doubled in front of a Juan Soto home run, his 13th of the season. Fifth inning, Brandon Nimmo leads it off with a home run, his 11th of the year. Seventh inning, Brandon Nimmo leads it off with his 12th home run of the year. Huge game for Nimmo, who goes 2 for 3 with the walk, scores 3 times, and the only out that he hit into was an absolute rocket off the bat. Came off the bat at 106 miles per hour, the hardest hit ball of the day for Nimmo. Traveled 358 feet. If it went 360, probably would have been a home run. Instead, Alex Call made a catch crashing into the wall to rob Nimmo of at least an extra base hit. But regardless, great day for Nims. Juan Soto, 2 for 4 at the homer. And then, of course, we already mentioned the doubles by Lindor and Alonso. So the Mets were able to provide David Peterson with 5 runs of support, but he only needed 1. Peterson, simply sensational. No doubt about it. Best start of the year. First shutout for any Mets pitcher this season, and first complete game for any Mets pitcher this season. Those numbers might hold all year. We don't see shutouts anymore. It's almost as rare as a no-hitter in today's game to see a guy go the distance and pitch a shutout. Now, the other part of it too, as I'm thinking about this, like, I would love to know, has there been in the last 5 years more combined no-hitters or shutouts by one pitcher? I'd be curious. I really would, because it just feels like something that is so rare nowadays because everyone's got that pitch count. Once you get close to 100, you're probably going to get the hook. But this game was the culmination of the last, year plus of David Peterson, who came off the IL about a year ago. It was May 29th last year. You could say that was right there that sparked everything for the Mets. It was one of the components that changed things for the 2024 Mets, was Peterson coming off the IL right around the same time that Jose Iglesias came up from Syracuse and Mark Vientos got the keys to third base, when Daniel Nunez was brought up and made a key part of that bullpen when Christian Scott was sent down. Peterson was the move that really sparked a lot of the things for the Mets pitching staff, where they went from that point on really as a 5-man rotation, and their strength was getting length from their starters between Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, and David Peterson, with, of course, Tyler McGill and Paul Blackburn mixed in there as well in that last spot in the rotation. But it was really those 4 guys that carried the Mets to that incredible season. And now here you're seeing David Peterson, no Manaea, no Severino. He's the other guy atop this rotation now with Kodai Senga. And he's pitching like an ace. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You look at what he's done, and he's the guy that steps up when the bullpen is taxed after that rain-delayed game against the Dodgers. He's the guy that steps up and pitches the Mets to a victory and gets all but 4 outs in the game. He's the guy that looks at this Nationals lineup and says, yeah, for me, my stuff plays against them. I'm just going to attack all night long, and I'm going to get as deep as I can in this game. And you look up, and through 6 innings, he's sitting at 66 pitches. I mean, that's when you started to know, okay, well, Peterson's got a shot. And you look at the breakdown of the outs throughout this game. 14 of the 27 outs came on the ground. You had 1 double play ball, then 13 ground balls, and 6 strikeouts. So 20 of the 27 outs didn't get up in the air. There were some pop-ups mixed in. There was just nothing that was really hit hard all game. Great defense played behind him, of course. The infield was crisp. Ronnie Mauricio's looked pretty decent over at third base. Brett Beatty looks great wherever you put him. He had such a good turn on that 1 double play ball. So quick for a guy that hasn't been playing middle infield his entire life. Only picked it up a little bit later than this time last year. And all of a sudden, here's Brett Beatty turning double plays with Francisco Lindor. So the defense was really awesome. And you go throughout the start. Peterson, through the first 3 innings, because of that double play ball, he faced the minimum the first time through the lineup. Gave up a 2-out single to James Wood in the 4th inning, then gets a strikeout to get out of that inning. A 1-2-3 5th, a 1-2-3 6th on 9 pitches. All 3 outs came on the ground. That's again where he was at 66 pitches through 6 innings. You're starting to think about it. Then the 7th inning starts, gives up 2 hits real quick to start off the inning. Huascar Brazaban's warming up in the bullpen. All of a sudden, you're thinking, okay, is Peterson even going to make it through the 7th? But he buckled down. And at that point in the start, he only had 2 strikeouts. But with 2 runners on, nobody out, knows that he needs a strikeout. What does he do? Back-to-back strikeouts. Gets the final out that he needs in the inning, a ground out to get out of the jam. 8th inning, opens it up with a strikeout. Then he gave up a double and a single. But the best defensive play of the game, every shutout is going to need at least one big play you look back on and say, man, that was the play that the pitcher needed, and it came from Tyrone Taylor on that base hit with the runner starting from second base trying to score, and Taylor came up firing. Perfect throw home. Terrence put the tag down. The Mets were able to gun down a runner at the plate for the 2nd straight night, and Peterson was able to escape that jam in the 8th. At that point, he's sitting there at, what was it? I think it was a 9-pitch final inning, so he was at, what was it? So 97 pitches. And Carlos Mendoza said after the game that, he saw Peterson avoiding him. He saw a lot of Mets kind of looking at him, trying to see what he was going to do. He talked it over with Jeremy Hefner and Desi Druschel, and was trying to make the call there and figured out how many pitches he had left. Basically told Terrence and Peterson they had like 9 pitches, and that's exactly what they needed to get through the 9th inning. Ahmed Rosario hit into the first out, an absolute rocket, but hit right at Brett Beatty, who had moved over to play third base at that point. Beatty able to corral it. Then with James Wood up, Peterson strikes him out on 3 straight pitches. And that's where you knew, all right, he's got to finish this thing. And he does. Gets the final out on a ground ball, which was fitting with how the start went. And it is a shutout for Peterson. So incredible performance. And now you're looking at a guy with a sub-2.5 ERA through 13 starts. Only has a couple left before the All-Star break. And you got to think David Peterson has squarely pitched himself into the All-Star conversation. Will he get that nod? How good has he been since coming off the IL? I'm going to talk about all of that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And same-game parlays are not just for the NBA action. Could be your MLB action as well. Maybe you think day game Kodai Senga is going to rack up a ton of strikeouts on Thursday. You can look at what the line is on his strikeouts. Add that with a Mets victory, and you could come out winning big. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up because when you head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button to help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now, David Peterson, since coming off the injured list last year, has been so good and shockingly good when you compare him to the best pitchers in baseball. Across 34 starts, a 2.74 ERA, and that is across 202 third innings pitched. Mike Mayer tweeted this out. Mike Mayer of Mets Mirage. Since May 29, 2024, which is when Peterson made his first start last season. You look at the ERA leaders in Major League Baseball. You got Paul Skeens at number 1, 1.90 ERA. Michael King, number 2, 2.37 ERA. Chris Sale, who won the NL Cy Young last year, is at a 2.64 ERA. And then fourth on the list is Peterson at that 2.74 ERA mark. Zach Wheeler's just behind that at 2.76. Since last season, the Mets are 24-10 when David Peterson takes the mound. That's a .706 winning percentage. A team that wins at that clip would be on a 114 win pace. So that shows you how insanely dominant David Peterson has been and how dominant the Mets have been when he's on the mound. It's truly incredible because this is a guy that was never considered a frontline pitcher. Now in 2020, I was saying, oh, wow, like this guy looks really good. He had a great season. 2021, real down year, his first full year in the big leagues, pitching in front of real crowds and everything else. Because remember, 2020 was the COVID year, so he was just pitching in front of cardboard cutouts. Him and Andres Jimenez were great on that team. Only silver lining of that team was watching those two young guys have their early breakouts. So again, comes off of that 2021 rough year. 2022 pitched really well. The slider was disgusting. I remember the whiff rate was like 57% or something wild on his slider that year. Was striking out a bunch of batters, pitching in more of a swingman role. Some starts, a lot of work out of the bullpen too. Had a bunch of success. Seemed like his stock was on the way up. I remember going into the 2023 season, I did a show that longtime listeners would call infamous now, where I said David Peterson should be is at his, I can't remember the exact title. It's something along the lines of David Peterson. I want to see if I can find it actually. David Peterson, number 3 starter. Let's see if we can find this. Deep in the archives. 2 years ago, could David Peterson become the Mets number 3 starter in 2023? That was, let's see, November 22nd, 2022. Man, I would look so much better on that show than I did now. I gotta draw some LBs, man. I'm looking back at my face then. I looked sharp back in 2022. We're gonna clean that up. But when you look at the arc since then, 2023 disaster, and that's where that show became infamous amongst longtime listeners because it was thrown in my face a little bit. You thought he was gonna be a number 3 starter. He's got an ERA over 5. What's going on? Well, then we learned there was a hip injury. He got surgery. Comes back last year, and it's been a different guy. It's been the guy that was on that upward trajectory in 2020 when he had his rookie season and in 2022 where he had a really strong year. Now it's all coming together for David Peterson, who just threw the first shutout for a left-handed starter on the Mets since Steven Matz in 2019, which is a little bit ironic to me because David Peterson was never considered a prospect to the same degree as Matz, as Syndergaard, Wheeler, DeGrom, Harvey. That whole group that came through and led the Mets to a World Series. David Peterson never had that buzz to him. We never talked about David Peterson being an ace, but he's by far the best homegrown starter since that quartet, clearly. And he legitimately right now is pitching like an ace. You look at his last 5 starts, goes into Yankee Stadium, allows 1 run in 6 innings pitch, faces the Dodgers in that start after the rain, 7 2/3, gets all but 4 outs in that game, allows 2 earned runs. Then he beats the Rockies, goes 5 2/3, allows a run, goes into LA, tough ballpark to pitch, tough lineup to pitch against, goes 7, allows 3 earned runs, was in line for a win. Reed Garrett blows it in the 8th inning. Then you have this complete game shutout. All year, he has only allowed 3 earned runs twice. He's never allowed more than that. 11 of his 13 starts, 2 earned runs or less. David Peterson just continues to dominate. And it's not like Kodai Senga, who's probably the favorite of the Mets right now amongst their pitchers to be an all-star, him and Edwin Diaz, just because of the name recognition and the results. They've both been great this year. Senga's leading the National League in ERA. He might be leading Major League Baseball. 1.59 ERA on the season. I don't know if anyone's better in the American League, but in the National League, that is as good as it gets. Peterson, if you now look, he is sitting 4th in ERA behind Senga, Skeens, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Then you have David Peterson in the National League. He is 12th in innings pitched. But of all the guys who are ahead of him, they've all made more starts other than Zach Wheeler. Everyone else has made 14 starts. Peterson has made 13. And he's still fringe top 10 in innings pitched. And I'm sure if you went innings pitched per start, he would absolutely be in the top 10. To me, that's an all-star. And the Mets have so many candidates. I mean, it's wild. You can make a case for Senga, Peterson, Holmes, and even Canning if you wanted to out of the Mets rotation. I don't think that anyone outside of Senga or Peterson would likely actually get it. But again, all of them could be in the conversation with the way they're throwing the ball. In the bullpen, you got Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, and Huascar Braziban. All of them are technically all-star worthy. I think Diaz probably has the best shot at it, but you never know. Garrett with a sub-1 ERA might be able to sneak in there. And that's not even talking about Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, and Juan Soto, or even Brandon Nimmo. Jeff McNeil probably hasn't played enough games, but it's just wild how many well above average players are on this Mets team. That's why they have the best record in baseball right now. And I think they're going to have the most all-stars this year. I really do. Now, the Mets haven't always been well represented at the all-star game. They haven't always gotten the votes. Hopefully fans are showing out right now and specifically voting for Francisco Lindor, because if he's not an all-star, I might literally pull my hair out. So hopefully that comes through. But yeah, it's pretty insane that you can make the case for Peterson right now. And I think he should be an all-star. I think I'd rather see him make the all-star than Senga, just because it would be such a cool story. But both of them should make it right now. Really. I mean, 2 of the top 5 pitchers in the National League in ERA on the New York Mets. And Peterson still has a chance to improve that case, because he's got, 4 more starts maybe? That's just a rough guess, but maybe 4 or 5 before we get to the All-Star break. And he's going to pitch some big games. His next start, I believe it's going to come, I think it's the first game in that series against the Braves on Tuesday in Atlanta. That's going to be a huge start for him. So we'll see how this continues to progress from this point on. But right now, at this very moment, I would call David Peterson an all-star. And after always sort of pushing back on a ceiling beyond a number 3 starter, because I always felt like that was really the sweet spot for David Peterson. If he's your number 3 starter, you got a good rotation. And to a certain extent, I still feel that way, because I think come October, if Sean Manaea is the version of Sean Manaea we saw last year, that's an extra layer of dominance with his strikeout stuff, his ability to really overwhelm lineups with his fastball up in the zone. So you could still get to a point where David Peterson is the number 3 on this team, where it's Senga, Manaea, Peterson. But calling him a frontline starter at this point, when he's consistently pitching to a sub-3 ERA, at some point you have to go beyond the expected metrics. And it was a good conversation they showcased on the game today, where Steve Gelbs talked to David Peterson about that. And he said, look, the expected ERA, all these different things, they don't account for pitchability. And that's what he has. And he might not blow the world away with strikeouts. He might not throw the ball 98 miles per hour like Mackenzie Gore was throwing it earlier on in this series. But he has the ability to attack the zone. He's a big guy, 6'6", left-handed pitcher, throws from a tough angle, hard to pick up. He knows his stuff plays. And he's just able to attack, keep the ball on the ground, keep the ball in the yard. and he has the guts to make big pitches when he needs to. And that is a huge thing for this team to have right now. And I would be very surprised, of course, barring health, you always have to say that, but I'd be very surprised if David Peterson is back in the bullpen come October. I think he is making a very, very clear case that he's going to be one of the best starting pitchers on this team coming into the season, and he's going to be getting the ball in October, and I can't wait to see what he does with that. But I also want to think about maybe what's beyond October. Should the New York Mets consider extending David Peterson? That's where we're going to close the show. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start to build wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever as you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now let's talk about David Peterson's contract status because it's actually unfortunate. Peterson only has a year of control after this season. He will be a free agent in 2027. So the clock is ticking to get a long-term deal done if that's something the Mets even want to explore. He's 29 years old. This year, in his second year of arbitration, he's making $4.63 million. Next year, you expect him to get a pretty nice bump, especially if he does make the All-Star team. At least over $10 million. Probably not to $15 million, though. And most starters on the market, the free agent market, are easily clearing $15 million. So that is your window of opportunity to give David Peterson an extension, whether that's at the end of this season or maybe it is at the All-Star break. Although if he's there, I don't know if he's going to be really excited to be negotiating a contract. Maybe his agent will handle it, bring a number to him. But it would be a matter of making more money next year. And if it's signed midseason, getting some type of a signing bonus that bumps up what he's earning this year. But if you were to just sort of put some type of a contract in front of him, like what does it look like? See, if you had more years of control, that's where you get a better deal. But because you don't, because you only have a year of control after this season, I think it's really just a matter of putting a good sum of guaranteed money in front of him and seeing what he does with it. So after the season, maybe it is 4 years, $60 million. $15 million for next year, and then 3 years at that same number. Maybe it's you sign him this year and it's $50 million in new money. It's $15 million next year, and you buy out his first 2 free agent years at that price. You don't have to have that additional year that I don't know what the Mets would necessarily want to go to, just because they're always going to be hesitant to spend on pitching with David Stearns, and rightfully so. I was beating the drum at times in the offseason. Why not just get Corbin Burnes? Well, now you see why not get Corbin Burnes, because he might end up with Tommy John surgery, and then all of a sudden you don't have him for 2 years of a 6-year deal where he's making a huge chunk of money. So the Mets are always going to be a little bit risk averse to giving out longer term deals to pitchers. I think David Peterson's a pretty safe bet because he's not the guy that is out there grabbing 100 miles per hour out of his arm and putting so much torque on it. He is more of a pitchability guy, more of an old school type arm who maybe could be a little bit more durable. So I'd feel confident or comfortable in the Mets extending Peterson, not for 6 years, but if you could get him and buy out 2 or 3 of his free agent years, I'd be all about it. I just don't know if either side is going to really prioritize making a deal, because for Peterson, you could say, all right, well, I'll take the money now, but you also might think, well, if I can keep this up and I can go through 2026 and pitch to a sub-3 ERA again, or even sub-3.5 ERA, and you have 3 years where you've stacked up of doing that, all of a sudden the market opens up to you going into your age 31 season, where maybe there is a 4 or 5 year deal on the table where you're clearing $20 million per season. So there is definitely a lot of upside that he would be forfeiting by taking a deal early. But the other part of it is so much less risk. You're locking in your money. And that's where the Mets might be able to get a little bit of a sweetheart deal by trying to negotiate now instead of later. Do I think a deal gets done? Most likely not. And it's a couple different things. For one, if the Mets did a deal midseason, you're paying 110 cents on the dollar on that deal. It's going to be more expensive on the front end. Now, every year the Mets might be in the luxury tax, but at the same time, it's impacting your current tax bill, which is already astronomical, So that's part of it. The other part of it is being risk averse to giving out deals to pitchers. David Stearns probably looks at it and says, yes, we could extend David Peterson, but we could also sign him when he's a free agent after this upcoming year, and we can let him play it out. And in the meantime, we'll learn a lot about the arms that we have. And who knows, you might look at the 2027 Mets rotation. I believe Kodai Senga and Clay Holmes would both still be under contract by then. I think Holmes might have an opt-out, though, after next season. So there is a world where, hey, everything works great for him. He might be opting out of that deal, but still Senga will definitely be around. Sean Manaea will definitely still be around for that one more year. And then you might have Nolan McLean in the rotation. You might have Brandon Sproat in the rotation. You might have Jonah Tong in the rotation. Christian Scott should be back next year off of his elbow surgery. So the Mets have a lot of arms that they could potentially have in that mix come 2027. That's not even talking about Tyler McGill, who has one extra year of control than Peterson, who could be still hanging around by the time we get there. So knowing this executive and David Stearns, knowing the situation the Mets are in with how much money they've already spent, I don't necessarily envision them doing this, particularly midseason. I think it's more of a conversation where you're deciding his salary next year, where you say, hey, we actually will give you a 4-year deal now. I think that's probably when it could happen if it ever does. But I also think the Mets might just be inclined to let it all play out. Either way, he's making himself a lot of money. I'll tell you that. If David Peterson keeps this up, it's going to be a hefty contract whenever he does get his long-term deal. And he deserves every penny of it. He has been a really great success story for this organization. And I'm excited to see where the rest of his season goes. Now, talking about today's game, Kodai Senga versus Mike Soroka as the Mets try to finish off the Nationals and complete the sweep and bring this winning streak to 6 games. Soroka's coming off his best start of the season, where he went 6 innings of shutout ball, allowing 2 hits and just 1 walk. But that start came against the Texas Rangers, who have not been a good offensive team this year. So I wouldn't read too much into that. He's got an ERA, I think it's 4.68 in the higher fours. So it's been an okay season for Soroka. He's got pretty good stuff, but certainly a pitcher the Mets can hit. And Kodai Senga on the other end of it is leading Major League Baseball in ERA. So they have a huge advantage when it comes to the pitching matchup. The bullpen is completely fresh thanks to David Peterson. So go out there and win a series. Or excuse me, they already won a series. Go out there and sweep a series. Keep the winning streak alive. If they're able to finish off a sweep and if they can win their series against the Rays over the weekend, which is not going to be an easy task. The Rays are a better team than the Nationals right now. They're 5 games over 500, and they've won 7 of the last 10. So it's going to be a tougher task. If you can win this game and then you can beat the Rays over the weekend, it is a 5-1 homestand. That would be pretty nice. That'd be a pretty good way to finish things off before you head on that tough road trip where you go into Atlanta and then to Philly before coming back home to face the Braves. So I want to see the Mets continue to stack wins while they have these opportunities before they face their 2 chief division rivals. And it's a good opportunity to do so on Thursday. When it comes to the lineup for the Mets in this one, my guess is Brandon Nimmo gets a DH day. That's just my thoughts. Day game after a night game. Your top 4, you're not changing anything there. It's going to still be Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso. It seems like that's the ideal grouping. These guys are all starting to swing it really well. Brandon Nimmo now gives the Mets potentially 4 hitters on a 30 home run pace. His pace right now is 29 home runs. Soto's pace is 31. Lindor's 34. Pete Alonso's 41. That is incredible production if they get all those home runs from those 4 guys. And you're seeing the balls are flying now. I mean, Brandon Nimmo talked about after the game. When you look at April and May, home runs are always going to be down at Citi Field. But once you get into June, gets a little more humid, all of a sudden the ball just starts flying. And he was the beneficiary tonight with those couple home runs. But you're seeing Soto starting to leave the yard with regularity, Pete Alonso as well, Lindor. That grouping is so good. And then beyond that, Jeff McNeil, the way he's swinging it in the 5-hole, I love that. If Nimmo's DHing, that would mean probably Jeff McNeil's out in left, Tyrone Taylor in center. I wouldn't be surprised if Luis Angel Acuna gets one of those rare starts just because it is a day game after a night game. And I could just see Carlos Mendoza sticking him in there, either Acuna or Mauricio. If it is Mauricio, if it's Mauricio, I'd imagine he's at third. Beatty's back at second. If it's Acuna, he'd obviously be at second. Beatty would be at third. And Terrenz, actually, I wonder if Terrenz would start a day game after a night game. It might be a little Hayden Sanger action with Francisco Alvarez on paternity right now. So we'll see. But my guess, 1 through 4 stays the same. Then maybe it's McNeil, Taylor, Beatty, Acuna, Sanger. We'll see, though. We'll see how the Mets line it up. That would be a little bit of a weaker bottom 4. So maybe Mauricio is in there instead of Acuna. But I don't know. There's something telling me that Acuna is going to finally get a start. Not that I necessarily think he should be starting much over Mauricio, but I think you want to give him some starts. I don't know if you want to just have him rot on the bench for multiple weeks at a time. That's why eventually the Mets probably should send Acuna down when they can. I think they're waiting on another player getting healthy, and then they might decide to do that, Vientos being the guy that should be back first. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. If they win today, they will be 20 games over 500, and I will be covering it live. I'm going to do a stream after the game because I believe Chris Schubert, who does our Locked On Mets postcast, will be working. So I'll get you covered for a podcast right after the game ends, and then I'll still have your normal show for you on Friday morning. Finally, I think I'll be able to talk about Pete Alonso chasing down Strawberry and predict when I believe he will get there. So that should be a fun show to look forward to. As always, thank you all for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.